Welcome back to another video on my Talk Walks series, and just wanted to take you up to a very beautiful park in kind of central Connecticut on a fall afternoon, and just wanted to talk about a few things and give you some beautiful views of a New England area kind of fall. Now granted, a lot of the leaves that this area is famous for have already fallen, but I'll flip the camera around so you can kind of see where I'm at and to give some idea of what stage we're at when it comes to fall. But I really wanted to talk to you about a couple things. We're only a few days away from the very controversial and very unusual presidential election cycle that's going to happen in a couple of days. I know that there's been a lot of buildup that's been around this. And here, let me extend up so you can kind of see at a much kind of higher level this area. And it's a beautiful blue sunny day, and it's in the 60s today, so I feel fortunate. Now granted, living in New England these falls are kind of a short-lived kind of experience before we get into the full kind of winter cycle. But let me bring it down, and I think you've got a feel for where I'm at. It's actually a dog park is what this actually is. And so let me flip this around, and let's talk a bit about what I'm seeing happen and what might be on your mind as far as in this current presidential cycle. And I live in one of the few states that is considered to be a democratic state, I guess, or a state that leans a little bit more on the liberal side. And I've never really lived in a state, actually the more I think about it, that wasn't a liberal kind of leaning state. So it's one of those things. I know I grew up in Washington State and in the Seattle and Bellevue area, and that has historically been a very Democrat-centric liberal state. And I moved out to Connecticut and made that choice not because of ideology or party. It just was a choice I made at the time. This was back in 2019, 2020 timeframe. Actually, I think it was a little later than that. But back in those days, I didn't really think about politics, right? I didn't think about that maybe there's some impact from being in a certain state, right? Living in a state that's seen differently than other states. So let's contrast that with like Texas or more the central or the middle of the country states, which tends to be very conservative, right? So you have this kind of political divide and tension. And I think when you live your whole life in one of these states, at least when I grew up, I was born in the early 60s. And so those kind of issues weren't really top of mind. I didn't really even think about that I lived in a Democrat-dominant state. And I'm not sure that most anybody else did either. So it's really kind of an interesting time that we're in, where there's so many elements of people's perception around division and how that is really having an impact on people's emotions and how they think of themselves. And I've been really kind of challenged as I think about these issues and what it means to be a Democrat, what it means to be a Republican or a Trump Republican. And I do kind of wonder if politics is coming into all of our lives for some sort of reason. Why is everything top of mind around politics, right? Everything is being associated with politics these days. And it really makes you kind of ponder why that's happening all of a sudden now. And I've been doing a lot of kind of deep research and trying to understand as much as I can around why this is happening, and also really kind of diving into each of the political parties, right? The Democrats and the Republicans. I didn't really, in most of my life, I didn't really even think about this stuff. It just wasn't, I mean, I thought about it every time that we had to choose a new president. And I've been through the election cycle many times. And I just have never felt so much division and so much angst and so much fear and so much anxiety about one side winning over the other, and so much kind of inflamed language and accusing each other of having evil intent, right? And not really having kind of a more unified thought process about what it means to be an American and what it means to have some national pride and national honor and having values that have been with us my whole life. And why is it changing? Why is there so much focus on race? Why is there so much focus on gender? Why is there so much focus on these elements that are clearly dividing us based on moral and ethics and kind of perceptions that people have about differences? It doesn't feel quite right that we are focusing so much on those issues now. I'm just not understanding where this is coming from to some degree, even though I've really dived into it. I've really listened to what the Democrats have to say, listened to what the Republicans have to say, and that even includes Donald Trump. And listening to what he has to say, understanding his background, understanding at a deeper level, not just sound bites that the media might play. And that's also the case on Kamala Harris and the Democrats too. I think as a voter, and I've always had these values, but I think now more than ever, we all need to really spend a little bit of time and take responsibility for being a voter, about being an American, and about being patriotic to our own country and trying to do what's right. I think a lot of people are putting too much trust in what others say about politics these days, whether it be the media. And this thing that keeps coming up in my head is that each side says that the other side is wrong. Well, I think at the end of the day, there is a difference between right and wrong. But at the end of the day here, as we look at what's happening, that right and wrong has a filter through some level of morality, right? Or some level base belief on a certain kind of foundation. And it feels like we're losing a common foundation in this country. So as we think about the election coming up here, maybe it is time for us to maybe step back and reassess this contrast between what's termed progressive ideology and conservative ideology, and think maybe there's elements of both that are important. But maybe human ideology might be a better way of looking at this. And I'm not sure how we get there with that, because I think what we've seen is people in groups are taking people's emotions and using them and weaponizing them against each other. And that's not helpful to a civilization like a democratic republic. Everybody talks about this country being a democracy. And I think that's a little misleading, because we're not really truly a democracy. We're a democratic republic, and that's, if you're knowledgeable about our form of government, that's what we are. But when you talk about democracy, if you go and actually look up what the definition of democracy is, it's actually quite different than what you might perceive it as. I know that there's the Democrat Party and the Republican Party, so they're kind of blending those concepts together on us to some degree. The Republic can be construed as part of the Republican Party, right? And the Democrat side can be construed as being a part of the Democratic Party. But it's far more nuanced than that. And I think that we all have to be very careful as we think about our country and how we think about the direction of this country. And I think I'm increasingly leaning towards thinking about this country from the lens of more traditional thought process. And that may be a reflection of my age, who I am. I'm in my 60s, and I've been through a lot. I've seen a lot in this country over the years. I grew up in a different time. But while that's the case, I also want to hold on to some of the values that this country has and what it was built on. And I don't think that's a problem. So as I walk around this green area, and increasingly becoming barren because we're losing all of the leaves on the trees. I think if I was out here just a month ago, we probably would have seen this as a lush green oasis of sorts. And this is what happens in New England in the middle of winter, and I think a lot of people don't realize it. They just focus on the fall colors and the lusciousness of the green out here. It's a little bit of a contrast to my experience being from Seattle, where there's this concept of evergreen trees, which we don't really have out here. So as we move into this next cycle, I think after next Tuesday, we're going to come into a period of time of a lot of unrest, a lot of anxiety. I think people are going to be scared and nervous about what's next. And I am concerned that there are individuals in our government and in places of power that may have a different plan for us, that may not be exactly what we all might want or think should happen here. And I hope we don't see purposeful unrest that's initiated by either side if one side or the other loses the election. I hope this doesn't happen. But I'm also a realist to think that we've moved down this path so far where it is very likely at this point that we may lose control of our democratic republic, right? And things may get out of hand for some period of time. I'm hoping that this is just a temporary kind of situation that we're going to go through. So this is I'm coming back around again to a different area, but you can see it's very green out here right now as far as the grass is concerned, but it's been very dry out here too. So to kind of wrap up the video and my thoughts here is that I hope all of you go out and vote. Make sure that you vote. I would, like it's being commonly recommended now, vote as early as you can. Get out and get your vote, because you never know what's going to happen on Tuesday that may limit your access to the ballot box. I think that there is that level of uncertainty that's out there that is probably fairly valid. So vote early if you can. If you can't, then be there. I mean, you may face lines that you have to be very patient to get through in order to get to the ballot box, but I think it's very important, no matter what side of this issue, is that the American people need to pay attention to what's going on, and they need to get out and tell our government what we want, what the people want. This is our only chance. And so we have to really kind of step up to the plate and express ourselves. Now, granted, we all have just one vote, supposedly, right? And that's our vote to how we want to be governed by our government. I do like the idea that the conservatives have of maybe scaling back government a little bit. So I think that ideology and that approach is probably good. I think government is maybe getting a little bit too large. And given that, having an emphasis more on free speech, more conservative values. I mean, I spent most of my life as a Democrat myself. I mean, I caucused for Bernie Sanders out in Seattle many years ago now, back when he was close to winning the presidential election. And so I've been on really the Democrat side for most of my life, but I am concerned about what I'm seeing on the Democratic side. I don't see the same level of democratic values over there, or democratic republic values, as I've seen in the past. And as we've seen, many very well-known Democrats have shifted over to become conservatives. And it has to make you wonder, why is that happening? I'm just posing the question and encouraging you to get out and vote. And I'll keep making these walk talks and sharing my thoughts. And if you have any questions, or if you have a comment, I want to hear from you and what you think is going on in the comments below on my YouTube channel at Rob Greenlee. And so thank you so much for watching this. I'm going to head back to my car, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you very much. Bye.